Hi, my name is Brandon,
I'm Najee.
and we are recording for Gender Studies 201. The film Misrepresentation initially it shocked me as a man, not really with as much of an emotional reaction as I would if I were a female. I can definitely empathize with their struggle for sure, just from my background. I wasn't I mean, I was raised in a rather egalitarian household, like treat people the way you want to be treated. So I've always had the sense of I don't want to be rude to anyone, so I'm going to try to be as nice to people as I can. So I can definitely empathize with how people are struggling within this film, for sure. Is that so?
I wouldn't say, obviously, I've never experienced these problems firsthand. I've witnessed them growing up in a single mother household. Um, I've seen some of these things take place. Obviously, some very disgusting things, but I can definitely say that throughout most of my life, I've been, there's been some sort of oppression towards men, but definitely not as much as women go through every day. And like sometimes in the film they discuss how men are it's some men are expected to be more manly. It's supposed to be the more masculine figure of the household, and it's not okay to be seen as a little bit more feminine or have emotion. And that I can definitely say I've experienced throughout my life.
So with that out of the way, that was just the introduction to the video. Now we can get on to the actual discussion, like the prompt, like the discussion prompt of the video. So we both noticed that there was a distinct lack of women, like a distinct lack of representation from women of color and non-white women in particular. There were some representation, particularly in interview, like throughout the interviews and with stuff like Da Vinci's story when she was running for youth governor. That was like honestly one of the very few non-white representations of women's struggle in America, and to me that seems like it would skew the data for like for people say outside of America looking in on this like on this documentary saying, oh, well, since they weren't represented, African American, Latino women, and stuff, I mean, other women of color must not have it as bad as, say, white women, just because they weren't represented as much.
In society, it's very well known that women of color seem to be much more oppressed than a white woman, unfortunately, and to this day, it's still seen. There was there wasn't much representation in the film, but there was a scene with a young African American girl who went throughout her school years keeping her hair straight because usually curly or natural hair isn't accepted among most schools, especially very nice ones with upkept dress codes. So that was definitely one thing I saw. But throughout most of the film, I definitely think they could have discussed much more further into women of color because it's a huge issue today throughout like the Latino community, African American, Asian, all of those. Their beauty standards are expected differently than as maybe a white woman would. So
So with that, I mean, as that with the thesis of the video, I think a really good ongoing point would be for future documentaries and documenters to include women of color, African Americans, Asians, Latinos, Middle Easterns in more of their documentaries, like actual interviews, storylines, stuff like that within their documentaries. So that way they can get a broad data, like more data available to viewers because, as Najee said, there's very little representation, and there was just that one minor storyline used for that girl who was having to keep her hair straight throughout her school life. So, yeah, I think so.